IVM.
I've wasted so much time trying to connect to a phone banking executive or trying to sort out the various IVR menus. I'm honestly surprised I've ever managed to get any banking work done. Thankfully, now with the Jupiter Digital Banking app, these things are finally in the past. Their super easy to use app simplifies banking in a way we've never seen before. They have a 24/7 chat bot live on their app, which connects to a human within seconds if you need. In case of more complicated interactions, you get a ticket number which can be tracked to determine where your query or complaint is and by when it can be resolved. So check out jupiter.money to find out more or download the Jupiter app on Android and iOS to get started. Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashdin, Doctor, your habit coach. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that is very, very personal to me, something that I am very happy to promote because it is about understanding our mental well-being. You know, we are so focused on our physical well-being and our physical fitness that we forget to transcend that there is an entire mental aspect to us as well. And understanding this mental aspect is so important. And as you know, we've had so many guests on the podcast talking about this. Today, we're going to be talking about one aspect in particular. And for that, I have with us Aparna Piramal. Aparna, welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Aparna, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into this idea of mental health, mental well-being?
Yeah, I think bipolarity just found me, I guess, 22 years ago. I like to say that, a lot of people have been dealing with mental health issues in the pandemic for 2 years, but I've been dealing with my pandemic for 22 years. So,
wow.
Yeah. So basically, I was 24 and I had just got an offer to go to Harvard Business School, and I had just finished an internship with a very senior government person in Andhra Pradesh. And I was super excited about changing the world. And I thought, it was the dot-com boom and, India was going to be ruling the markets. And I just got into this kind of upward spiral of just getting higher and higher and just getting caught up with my ideas. And it reached a stage where literally I couldn't travel by myself to go to the US to start my course. And my family had to come with me. And eventually I did actually settle in, but I was quite depressed for a long time after my family left. So, that's when the mood swings started when I was in my 20s. And over the last 20 odd years, they've been up and down. It's not like I'm there all the time. Like most of the time, I'm what you would call normal. But, I do have these extreme mood swings from time to time. And for that, I have to do a whole bunch of different treatments and therapies that I've developed. Luckily, for the last 4 years, things have been pretty stable. And so that's what's allowed me to write this book that we're going to be discussing today. So
Tell us a little bit about the book, Aparna.
Yeah, so the book is called Chemical Khichdi, How I Hacked My Mental Health. And my day job is also as a writer. So I write a column for The Mint. I teach on design and business at a university. I'm involved with some nonprofit work also, and I do some public speaking. So I have a career outside mental health, but I felt very much that I wanted to tell this story and that I had learned a few lessons and tools and techniques that had worked for me, which I thought could be useful to people outside. And so that was very important. And I think as a writer, you just want to share your own story. It's, that's almost like a compulsion. So that's how this book has come to be.
And these are techniques that you developed, people helped you through, and you experimented. How did these tools come together?
Yeah, so I was officially diagnosed quite late. So that was in 2013. And about 18 months after that diagnosis, I wrote a note called 10 Things I've Learned About Being Bipolar. And when I wrote that note, I felt there were some ideas in there that could turn into a book, and my family were quite encouraging. So based on that, and with the help of my book club and writers groups, I developed this whole idea of these 7 therapies that have worked for me. And these are all therapies that are drawn from everyday life. They can actually work for anyone who wants to enhance their mental well-being. They don't have to have a mental condition in order to read these. And we can discuss them further. But they are just things that have worked for me, and I hope they will form a pathway for people who are, want to go down this road.
Lovely. So what is bipolar? Can you define that? Can you share what it is to, experience it, and what is the actual definition of it?
Yeah, so bipolar disorder used to be known as manic depression. So, the idea was that you would be manic at times and you would be depressed at times. I think all of us do understand what depression is quite clearly. But mania, I think, is new for many of us.
Correct.
And mania is really this feeling of there being either like a tornado in your head or like a orchestra or symphony of many different soundtracks in your head. And there's just a lot of different kind of emotions. It could be excitement, it could be stress, it could be all of them combined, it could be anger, frustration. Usually it's this cocktail of emotion that leads to you losing a lot of sleep. And so the way I look at it is that if I lose sleep for, let's say, 5 nights in a row, it's going to lead to a chemical imbalance where I start, I don't have so much control over the thoughts in my head. But what is keeping me awake for 5 nights in a row is a psychological issue. So as I see it, it's a combination of something that's psychological and something that has a chemical imbalance to it. And the symptoms really are that you're talking a lot, not sleeping, just a lot of energy, maybe a lot of ideas, very different behavior than normal. Like people go on spending sprees or they get involved in other relationships. Somebody might trash a restaurant, and people have different sins basically that they commit during this time. And for me, it's always been a lot of writing. So I'm able to kind of churn out pages and pages of stuff, some of which is great and some of which is not so great. So.
I was in fact going to ask you that question, saying that are all manias bad or are manias useful? Can you harness manias in a particular way?
Yeah, so that's a problem with Ashdin, is that it's kind of fun also at times, right? And especially the hypomania stage, which is less than the full mania, if you like, or definitely much less than, psychosis, you can actually be very productive and creative. And a lot of, so-called, as I would like to label anyone creative or not creative, but when you're in that creative phase, like, you can actually words just come to you easily. The whole world seems to come alive, everything just seems so much richer. It's hard to give that up. And it's hard to at least tell yourself that happiness is not in the highs, because there is a lot of happiness at that time in that high. So, yeah.
And there's no way to surf it. There's no way to keep it going at that level without having a crash or without it getting out of control.
Well, I think it's much harder to do that. Like, I think if you're losing sleep and if you're, I think one of my doctors told me is that if you're feeling creative and you're not losing sleep, that's fine. But if you're feeling creative and you are losing sleep, that's not good. Because, it's just going to escalate, and then you're going to have to take the medication, and then there's going to be a downer, and then you're going to feel awful, and inevitably the medication might help, make you put on weight, or it just makes you feel really, really, you're just really zonked out. So it's not a great combination. So I think that the challenge is really to be at a stage where you can experience a lot of emotion, and you can have the intensity of the emotion, and you can have the ability to create, but you're not actually heading towards a high.
Okay. Yes. So how would a person listening to this either help somebody in the family or help diagnose that? Do they have it? Does somebody in the family have bipolar as an issue? Like, how would you actually go about saying that maybe this is something I need to investigate?
Yeah, so I have this kind of advice for caregivers, which I call the 3 T's. So one of them is trust. I think it's really important that the person that you're concerned about trusts you. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that to build up that trust when times are good, because otherwise when there is, a lot of turbulence going on, that person will not trust you. The other very important part is trigger management, to have red flags and to talk about, seeing something happening, like, because there's a build-up. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight. You might see it for like a week, 2 weeks. You could see that if they're losing sleep, if they're getting excited, but it's a very fine line between being a policeman and a vigilante and also being supportive. So you have to kind of have these red flags. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to discuss it with another member of the family and say, do you think they're doing okay? Or do you think that will happen? And of course, there's also formal testing. I mean, I did when the early days when we were really unsure and we didn't have so much insight into what bipolar was. And so I did do some formal clinical assessments to see if this was the condition to get a diagnosis. So you can definitely go to a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist and have those tests done. And the third part is therapy is a very important aspect of this. And I think therapy is important for the caregivers as well as, of course, it's critical to the patient themselves. But I think the key thing to keep in mind, Ashton, is the behavior really going off? Because I think we're all on a spectrum and we all have mood swings and we all have good days and bad days. So I don't think that it's actually something that you need to get so worried about unless the behavior is really becoming quite different and, from what they would normally exhibit.
So are there telltale signs of behavior change that you would be looking out for? Like, is there a checklist that, if somebody's doing this, this, and this, maybe it's time to, approach a therapist and see what we can do?
So a change in facial expressions, change in speech, change in energy levels, change in sleep, change in appetite, all of these things are indications that something is different, they're not their usual self, And also it has to go on for a certain number of days. Like if it's just going on for 1 or 2 days or whatever, then it's fine. Okay. But if it's going on for a certain period, like a week, 2 weeks, or, longer than that, then there's perhaps, okay, maybe we need to get this looked at.
So a longer period of time is one thing. If people are having, like the other day, somebody was having a mood change and said, I think I'm bipolar. That is not what we're talking about, right? Over a long period of time, when you're going through something, start looking for these telltales, and like you said, facial expressions, body language, the way people are talking. Are they losing sleep? Are they exhibiting anything that is not what they are normally like? I think those are the ways that you would go about it.
Yeah, I definitely think it's not just something that happens on, like a one-off occurrence. I think it has to go on for a certain period of time. I think that is a big indicator.
Lovely. So now that we understand that, okay, so this is an issue, the next aspect, like you were saying, is that we can start hacking our chemicals, right? We can start making these changes. And you said that there were these lifestyle components to it as well. Can we deep dive into that?
Yeah, sure. So these lifestyle components and, these hacks are just things that, like I said, I've come up with. I'll just give you a broad outline of what the 7 therapies are, and then we'll go further into one of them. But the idea is, first of all, is the medical part, which we've just talked about a little bit, like going to a psychiatrist or talk therapy, and ideally both. So that's the first. The diagnosis is really the starting point for any treatment and recovery, because without that, you're just in the dark. The second part is what I call love therapy, and that's the role of the family or the people who are close to you. They don't have to be necessarily family, but the people who are, in that caregiving role. That's really important. The third part is actually allies and the therapy of empathy. So this is something that's not discussed so much, but really what are the roles that friends, mentors, networks, communities, neighbors, what role can they play? Because their role is quite different from the role of a family member. And I really rely on my allies a lot, actually, even now, to get me through the day. And we can talk about that. Work therapy, again, I think is really critical, because work can be, of course, as we all know, pretty stressful, but work can also be therapeutic, right? And you have to all of us have to understand what our bandwidth is. What is that bandwidth where too much work is going to make you stressed? And what is the bandwidth where too little work is going to kind of make you depressed and feel like I'm not doing enough and, I could be more. So what is the bandwidth like? So
it's actually using work as therapy.
The work is therapy. Work is therapy for me. It's like one of the biggest things. And actual being able to talk about my condition at work was the game changer for me, because everybody at home knows about it. Your friends know about it. But the fact that you're actually able to share it at work with your bosses and with your colleagues and, and be open about it is actually the game changer. And that's the conversation I hope to drive much more in the future in India. So anyway, work is one. Then there are these conversations that you have with yourself. These are really important, taking the time out. And that's how I think we all want to grow as individuals, whether or not we have a mental health condition. I think that conversation that we're having with ourselves all the time is a really important one for our mental wellness and for our mental well-being. Then there is spiritual therapy, which has been a big part of my life. Maybe not everybody, kind of resonates with that, but for me, that's been really important. And then there is lifestyle therapy. So that I think would be of particular interest to your listeners. So I'll talk about that. So I think I've covered all of them. Yeah.
Perfect. We're going to take a quick break. See you on the other side.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says, the real-life Suryavanshi Vishwas Nagare Patil joins CP Law & Order, talks to Cyrus about his new book, Head Held High. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam talks to Anusha Ramakrishna and Anisha Dosa, co-founders at Jiffy. They discuss the concept of earned wage access and its benefits. Hans Vani completes 100 episodes. Listen to this inspiring story of a boy's struggle called Shambuk, Platform or Pilla. On The Habit Coach, Ashdin shares tips of how we can make our lives 10 times better. And on All Things Policy, the Takshashila folk analyze China's recently announced National Computing Network. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, please don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on. And remember, you can always check us out on YouTube. We have a number of channels. You can go to ivmpodcast.com/YouTube to take a look at what those channels are. We're also doing a small listener survey to understand how you respond to our shows and the advertising on the network. We would really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it out. It really helps us build better shows for you and understand what you're looking for from advertising and what we can talk to advertisers about who you are. Please go to ivmpodcast.com/survey. It really would help us out. Thank you so much. And finally, would like to thank our sponsors for the network this week, SBI Life Insurance, India Water Portal, and Jupiter, a digital banking app. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back. All right, let's jump into the conversation. I think the fifth one that you mentioned, which was the talking to yourself therapy, I think that is also a very critical one. And I would love to, deep dive with you on that as well, because I think that is a habit most of us don't have, or the way that we talk to ourselves is very, very rude. So maybe that is something that we can discuss as well.
Yeah. So I think talking with yourself is something I started doing about 10 years ago when I started maintaining a journal for the first time. I always had some sort of diaries here and there or whatever notes that I was making, but I formally started maintaining this journal. And I think it probably happened because I started off feeling like a complete failure. I'd been asked to leave my family business because my family literally said, you're not cut out to be a CEO, even though you've been to Harvard Business School, you can't do this job. And you're getting too stressed out with it and you're getting manic and, all the rest of it. And I felt terrible. And it was a way for me to talk through my emotions. I think that people can use different ways that they want to converse with themselves. But for me, writing in particular it gives you a lot of clarity of thought. It allows you to be very authentic and nobody's judging you. It's just your thoughts and feelings. You can go back to them. And over a period of time, you can see how you've grown and developed. So in fact, in my book, I've included a lot of journal entries, particularly in that chapter where I talk about my journey with myself. And really, my conversation with myself was about my sense of identity and my sense of purpose, my sense of, meaning in my life, and what is, even to use a word like, what is my dharma in life? Not in a particularly religious way, but in a kind of philosophical way. So these were the kind of conversations that I was having. And if you like, we could talk more about that.
I would love to. What are the kinds of different directions in which you can journal? Like how should people start thinking about journaling now?
Well, I think you could just think about what happened in a particular day and talk about that particular day and talk about that particular moment. But I don't write every day, certainly. Sometimes I'm just too busy. Often I've read through my journal, and sometimes it can be quite depressing because I only write when I'm depressed. So, sometimes I do want to make it a happier journal than it is, but it is a good place to write when you're feeling really down. But I often write it also as a recap of, look, this is what's happened in the past 2 weeks, and I just want to write so much has happened, and these are all the things that are going on. And it's really helpful to have those encapsulated sort of 2 weeks of what you're doing. I also marry my journal with a calendar. So I'm a little bit obsessive about my calendar and my diary. I put everything in there about what I'm doing. So when I do a journal and I'm doing a recap for the last 2 weeks, I find it quite useful to actually look at the journal and look at the diary and then see exactly what's happened. And then you can kind of piece it together and say, okay, this is how I was feeling. This is what's happened. This is what's making me good. And the other thing that I do really is I do usually try and do a recap for the year. And I say, this is what's happened in the year. And when you start doing that, you really look at what are the things that have happened. I don't always look at this happened in Jan or this happened in Feb, but I look at themes. So what has happened in terms of my relationships? What has happened in terms of the way I look at work? What has happened in terms of what's happened with the kids? So I think if you just pick up these themes in your life, whatever those themes that are important to you, then you can really see that the change that's happened over a period of time.
Fantastic. Do you also write letters to yourself?
No, I haven't written letters to myself at all, but I do write letters to other people from time to time. So they are
that
there.
You send or that you put in your book and never to be seen again?
No, sometimes I've sent them, sometimes I've not sent them. So, they are there. But so it's good to write in whatever form there is.
Okay. And the last point on this is, how much time do you think people should spend writing a day?
I think it's absolutely up to them, like how much people, whether they like writing or not. I think every day, some people maintain a diary every day. I don't do that. But I think at least when you sit down to write something, if you're making, at least spend 15, 20 minutes kind of capturing that moment and what that moment is. The other people say that, if you write by hand, I think you write more freely than if you write on the computer.
Correct.
So that is another suggestion that people have made.
We had a graphologist who talks about handwriting and on the podcast, and he was saying there's a direct connection between the brain and the hand. And we normally think that we write with our hand, but actually we're always writing with our brain. So it's always this connection that we're creating, which is why using your hand is such an important aspect versus just typing it out. Let's talk about the allies. I think that is also a very interesting, segment about what you said, because we normally rely on our family, right? And we think family, family, family. But I agree with you. There are certain things that family just cannot do for us, right? That we need our allies, mentors, friends, etc. for. How do you start approaching that?
Yeah, so I think the thing to remember is that, in a crisis situation, the family does not have the luxury of empathy. The family has to fix the problem, right? So if you need to be stabilized or tranquilized or whatever, they need to fix the problem. And let's say, or if you're depressed or if I'm down, they will fix the problem in different ways and find ways to help me kind of come out of that also. But the allies can offer much more empathy, and they can work in different ways. So the allies for me have been 3 specific groups. Like they've been mentors, they've been friends, and a lot of different friends all over the world, really. And they have been my networks, which have been primarily like my writing network and my readers book club. So just coming first to the mentor, like literally I've had a mentor who's helped me make this transition from business to journalism, and he's had a foot in both of these different sectors, and so he's really kind of handheld me. Like I think meeting him is like a post recovery ritual, like I've had like a decade worth of time where he's taken me to endless rounds of green tea, and he's just kind of said, you just welcome, you're no longer in the business world, welcome to the other side, and then you should enjoy this for what it is. And I'm sure, Ashdin, you also understand this kind of transition very well. So this mentor has really helped.
Absolutely, because it's giving up an identity, right? Like when you move from the business world, it's an identity shift, yeah.
It's a huge identity shift, especially when you are in a family business and everybody else, like all my cousins and my sister and everybody else in the family is in the family business. So a huge identity shift. So I think that, so he really helped me make that transition. So having somebody on both a professional and a personal side to do that. He was also somebody who was willing to receive a lot of the writing that I sent. And that is really unusual, because like when you're manic and you're just writing loads of things and you're just, screwing out these voice notes, and I would just send everything to him and he would be able to receive it. So the ability to receive something and not to judge is really a sense of being an ally. And I keep saying is, if it takes a lot to be a friend, it takes a hell of a lot of friendship to be an ally. An ally is a different order of friendship. So that's one kind. In terms of other friends, so I have this group of what I call my daily download friends. And these are friends with I'm just in touch with like every day, and we'll talk about our day. This is what's happening. This is what's going to happen. This is, and it could be minor stuff like, oh, my kids had a photo shoot, so I dressed them up and I made them wear the jacket you gave me, or I'm going to get my booster dose today, or, I'm traveling so and so. It's just the daily stuff. And the fact is, Ashdin, we live in a world where you can have all the 2 a.m. friends that you need for your emergencies, but where are your daily download friends who make the effort, And one tip I would love to share is that I have a friend who's in San Francisco. And obviously, we're not in the same time zone, so we can never really have a conversation. It's very difficult. But we leave each other WhatsApp messages, of like, let's say 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is. And we're just totally in sync because we know what's going on in each other's lives because we do that. So I think that not every friend can handle this kind of proximity. And also the other thing is it can be done remotely because my friends are in Dubai, San Francisco, London, as well as Mumbai. So I think anybody who says that mental health needs to be managed, we have this sense of mental health being managed in terms of going to a clinic and meeting a doctor. And no, it's just a totally different way. And this is not even about mental health. This is about friendship. But I think what they realize is that I need this kind of conversation, and they also like it, and they're happy to be there. So this is a big part of how friends can be, allies.
I think the best part about having global friends as your allies is also that your 2 a.m. friend means it's 2 in the afternoon for them across the globe. So there's always somebody in a time zone that you can call at no matter what time of night it is for you. So I think that's also a good way of having a global set of alliances.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, I miss having some of my closest friends, close to me in Mumbai and being able to see them. But I just don't want people to think that just because they're far away means they can't help. They totally can. And the other part is like my writers club and my book club. This book really would not have happened without these groups of people. So the way this whole book happened, like I said, I wrote this note on, the 10 things I've learned about being bipolar. It was my book club that said, you must turn this into a book. And they were really supportive of the idea. And it was my writers club, and it was the head of my writers club who literally said, Aparna, now every month we're going to meet, and every month you're going to give me a chapter. So, you have to look at it with that kind of deadline approach and just take it very seriously. And they gave me a lot of feedback into refining it and the structure of it, and just really, really, they read my drafts, they commented on them. So I think these are all ways that people can support. And I just could not expect anyone in the family to do any of that.
Correct. I can imagine, because the role of the family is completely different when it comes to it, right? The family it's
not that they didn't help. Of course, my family have been hugely supportive, and I wouldn't be here without them at all. They also read the manuscript and they comment on it, but they don't have the luxury of that distance that you need, and sometimes you can't expect your family to play all the different roles that you might need in your life. So, I mean, that's why I would say, I would go as far as to say that, a lot of people have been telling me, Ashdin, first of all, they tell me it takes a lot of courage to write this book, which is a different topic. But the second thing they tell me, it's going to help a lot of people. Kind of like saying, those are other people it's going to help, not me. But actually, this book is for everyone, because even if you are not, you don't have a mental health condition yourself. First of all, I think there is something in there that will help anybody with any sort of vulnerability and who's looking to understand more about resilience. But I think even if not that, then you are an ally. You are a caregiver. You are a colleague. And for those reasons, somebody who has a mental health condition, and this book will help you in terms of managing that relationship.
Fantastic. Aparna, thank you so much for coming onto the Happy Coach podcast. How can people reach out to you? How can people talk? How can people continue this conversation with you?
Yeah, so I'm on all social media, so they can just...
what is your social media handle?
So it's Aparna Piramal Raje on Instagram and on LinkedIn, and those are probably the best ones. I don't check Twitter so frequently, but the other two are.
That is good for your mental health and not to check Twitter more frequently. I think it's a fantastic skill. You probably should put it in your book. All right, Chemical Khichdi, please go read it. It's going to be fascinating to understand, not just like you said, for people who have mental health issues or are, support system for them, but for everyone, and understanding where our mental health lies. And that was Aparna Piramal talking about understanding mental health. Now, this was only part 1. Make sure you join us for part 2 in the next 2 days. Now, if you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am at Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. We have a brand new habit coaching online course quizzes, videos, and a lot more on the website awesome180.com. So check it out now.
You're the people pleaser, right? Oh, yes. Or then desperately seeking the one? Oh, wait, you're the one who doesn't think they're ever good enough. Oh. So much drama. And for what? Is it doing you any good? Listen to me. I'm Chetna, your favorite positive action coach. Yes, I'm the one who has been dropping all those truth bombs on every episode. Oh, no. And it's time you learn to say no to drama. That's also what my podcast is called. And a new episode is out every Monday and Wednesday on the IVM Podcast app, website, as well as all major podcasting platforms.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.